Joining me now is Representative Pramila Jayapal. Congresswoman, thank you as always for being here. You know, top of mind right now is the Key Bridge collapse in Baltimore. Do we know what the federal government is doing with the situation right now, and what are your thoughts on what happened?
Well, first of all, it's just a tragedy, and I feel so, just want to extend my condolences to the crew and families who have lost people in that accident. The NTSB is investigating right now. They're looking for the ship's black box. They are continuing to do that work. Meanwhile, President Biden has called for immediate funding so that we can replace that bridge completely. Obviously, it's a critical piece of infrastructure. So when we get back to Congress, my hope is that Republicans will join us in providing emergency funding for that bridge. We have invested in roads and bridges. The infrastructure bill provided a lot of that money, but obviously this was an accident, and we need to have those resources available if these kinds of things happen, and of course try to make sure they don't happen.
I mean, just look around as we're in Puget Sound, and we had some reporting this morning from Drew Andre just about our own ports, and
that's right.
Was that going through your mind too?
Yes, it was, because you know we have so many bridges here. We have focused on obviously trying to get money. I was so proud to get money for the West Seattle Bridge when we had that big problem with the West Seattle Bridge, but we have a lot of bridges that need replacement, that need infrastructure, and that's why I was so proud of the work I did to help pass the bipartisan infrastructure bill. President Biden has made infrastructure a reality, not just a talking point, not just Infrastructure Week where we talk about this, but he actually, and Democrats are the ones who got it done and invested this enormous amount of money, the largest investment ever in our nation's infrastructure.
Turning to the war in Gaza, this week, the United Nations Security Council passed a resolution demanding a ceasefire in Gaza. The U.S. has abstained from that vote. What are your thoughts in terms of moving forward with this? There always seems to be some sort of stalemate here.
Yeah, I mean, this was big progress in my mind because the United States to date has blocked ceasefire resolutions. This was a resolution for an immediate ceasefire. It also called for the release of hostages, and I think that the catastrophe, the humanitarian catastrophe that we are seeing in Gaza is something that is it's heartbreaking, it's absolutely wrong, and it's man-made. I mean, this is the current Netanyahu government blocking humanitarian aid into Gaza, continuing to pummel Gaza when over 32,000 Palestinians have been killed. Almost 75,000 have been injured. Pregnant women, Christine, who are there unable to get care. 1.1 million Palestinians on the verge of starvation. This is the largest crisis we have seen, and I think it's important for the United States to be very proactive in saying we are not sending shipments of arms to Israel unless Netanyahu comes to the table for an immediate ceasefire with Hamas, so that we can start to, get aid into Gaza, and so that we can start to think about what the long-term solution is to peace.
How will the U.S. approach this, especially since I just read that Netanyahu has canceled his visit to the U.S.? I mean, how can we move forward and come to some sort of agreement?
Well, he did cancel it, though the defense minister is still here for talks. Sure. Look, I think that we have to use our leverage. The only way Netanyahu is going to come to the table, I don't believe that Prime Minister Netanyahu wants to necessarily see an end, because I think he wants to stay in power. There are many things he could do to make sure that hostages are released. And the biggest one is a ceasefire. That was the last time that we had hostages released. And so the United States is the largest backer of military aid to Israel. And the only way we are going to make this difficult enough that Netanyahu comes to the table for a ceasefire agreement is by withholding arms shipments. And even Israeli war ministers have said that they could not launch this war in Gaza without the United States.
I want to go back to a bill that made a lot of headlines a couple weeks ago, the Tik Tok banning bill. Yes. You and Representative Rick Larsen voted against the Tik Tok ban bill. The majority of the House, however, voted, as you know, for it. Could you explain the reasoning behind your vote, and do you still stand by it?
I do still stand by it. I did a video explaining this. But look, I think that it's important that we look at the ownership question because the Xi government does put restrictions that force companies that are Chinese owned to turn over privacy information and data of people that, that would hurt our privacy. But I also think that it's important to not ban TikTok. And the way the bill was written had a very short period of time, 180 days, to effectuate this sale, and it would have led to a de facto ban. But in addition to that, I think we really have to look at the fact that, privacy issues are critical not just for TikTok, but for American-owned companies.
Yeah.
And I think we have to look at this holistically. That's why I was very pleased that the data brokers bill passed. And I have been pushing for a Fourth Amendment is not for sale bill as part of intelligence surveillance reform, FISA reform, Section 702, that hopefully we'll be taking up, because our data is being sold all over the place.
We all know it's happening.
We all know it's
happening, yes.
We know it's happening. And so, and the issues of the Xi government or any government influencing social media, that doesn't just go to TikTok. That is, frankly, with Twitter, or X as it's called now.
Yes.
It's with Meta. There are other companies that have the same issues. So I do think we need to look at social media more holistically rather than just call out TikTok. And I do think that the way the bill was written was likely unconstitutional.
Well, we'll see how things carry out in the Senate. We know that they're still deciding as well. Yeah. All eyes are going to be on the U.S. Supreme Court. They're taking up these arguments about mifepristone, the abortion drug. It sounds like the Supreme Court, it sounds like they're a little, from what I'm reading, a little skeptical of the arguments behind it. But what kind of impact could this have here in Washington? That's what we always think of.
Yes, right. Well, I mean, this would have an impact everywhere because they are deciding whether a drug that the FDA has said is safe, has done their trials, has been safe for decades, whether to essentially outlaw that. So that would affect people in Washington state. It would affect people everywhere. I think that they understand that this has gone too far. For a small, and they even said it, for a small group of anti-abortionists to say that the FDA is wrong and challenge this, it would be a big problem. But I just want to call your attention to the fact that the Republican Study Committee just put out their version of the budget, and in it, they ban abortion. They actually make sure that mifepristone would not be available. They double down on banning IVF, essentially banning IVF in their bill. So this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with not only a Supreme Court that hopefully will come out on the right side of this question, but also a Republican majority that is tone deaf to the fact that Republicans, independents, and Democrats believe that a woman's reproductive health should be her own business and not somebody else's.
We will see how the justices decide, certainly. As always, Congresswoman, thank you very much for being here with us. We appreciate all of your insights.
Thank you so much.